Gsluke here for our prize picks preview for round 3 of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Our picks for yesterday are worst in quite some time. We ended up going 2 for 5 on our main card. We had a little bit of success with our Fairways undercard. Our greens and regulation card was really close. Victor Hovland, who also tripped us up in our main card, ended up really sinking that ship. But like I said, the fairways extremely difficult to hit here, and a lot of the people that we ended up fading in that category, much like a Sam Burns, some of those lower tier players did in fact hit the under. So that card ended up making us a slight loser on the day. Didn't put quite as much money behind that parlay, so still ended up losing on the day, right around it was $25, I believe, by the end of the day. So it wasn't the end of the world. But of course, we're hoping to get a main card of 4 or at least 5 out of 5 to go ahead and bring home some of those big bucks. So we're looking to improve there. But the one thing that we do have after the first 2 rounds is a lot of information and a lot more confidence behind our bets. We have more data behind the greens and regulation, of course, for the fairways as well, and also how the courses started to get more difficult throughout the week. From round 1 to round 2, we saw the scoring average get a little bit higher, and you heard a lot of the players talking about firm and fast conditions. So we could expect it to be even more difficult to hold some of these greens, and of course to go out there and post a low score. So we'll talk about a lot of that when we're going through the picks, and for sure when we go through some of the data for the first 2 rounds as well. So real quickly on the screen, you guys can see we're going to go over some of the data for today's round first. And you see that the scoring average was 0.89 strokes under par, which is a little bit better than what we saw in round 1. A lot of that is due to that morning conditions. In round 1, it played almost over par in the morning. I mean, there was quite a bit of wind, 10 to 15 miles an hour, but in the afternoon, played nearly a stroke under par. Today, for the entire day, which conditions were even better today than what they were yesterday afternoon, played actually slightly harder than it did in the afternoon. So that's why I say the golf course is getting more difficult, because wind aside, just from the firmness factor, from the greens and the fairways, certainly getting harder to hit. In terms of the fairway percentage, it went from right around 50% in round 1 to right around 47% in round 2. And in terms of the greens and regulation, we also saw right around a 4% decrease, which isn't anything insane, but we do have a large enough sample size with over 130 players in the field to say that that is significant. It does pass the P test. If you guys remember that from back in high school, all that sort of stuff. It is a significant trend. Something to go ahead and notice for going forward is that this is only going to continue. There is not any rain in the forecast for the weekend, and even though there's not really a breath of wind, at least expected for tomorrow, those firm and fast conditions are going to become devilish. Holding some of these Sunday pin locations, but they're going to put them in some of the toughest spots on the golf course, is only going to make it even more of a problem. And really, something that I noted during the Discord, during a lot of the chats talking about prize picks, is we talked about how really when you get firm conditions in the fairways, you see a huge separation between the accurate drivers and the drivers that aren't very accurate. The guys that are keeping it, splitting the middle of the fairway time and time again, aren't going to miss many fairways in these firm conditions. They're used to splitting the middle. If anything, they get a little bit of a boost with the distance that's added. Whereas guys that are just a little bit offline, and even just a little bit is enough to miss these fairways, because you're going to get 20, 30, even 40 yards of rollout depending on the elevation change, which means that if you're even 2-3 yards offline, it could very well end up bounding through the fairway. So that's why we see such a low fairway percentage. And if we go ahead and hop over to the price fix board just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, a lot of the numbers, even with the best players in the field, are extremely inflated. I mean, especially for greens and regulation, which we'll get to here in a second, but even for score, I'll remind you guys over here at Data Golf, the average score was 0.89 under par. That means that the average actual strokes was 70.11. If we take a look at a lot of these prize picks board over here, it's guys near 67.5, and these are the best players in the world. So again, I'd have a hard time fading them. But further towards the bottom of the board, when we're talking about guys like a Billy Horschel, Kevin Kisner, especially people like a Brian Harman, you could argue that taking the over on strokes on these players would be the advantageous play. So it isn't something that I'm actively looking to doing, especially because fading players is just hard to do in general. You know, it's hard to really root against a player. A lot easier to try and root for somebody to do well. And it's also because these are some of the best players in the field. So their scoring average is probably closer to 68.5, maybe 68 for some of these elite players up top, which sure, actually might be something to take for the over and the under. But unless it's in an isolated circumstance where a guy just has a drastically wrong line, not going to be the market that I have my eyes on. The first real market that I see an edge is going to be in birdies or better. As always, there's going to be people that are mispriced. It's typically when somebody comes in not having their best form. And the first guy that you can see we have is Jordan Spieth over 4 birdies or better. First off, the number just seems a little bit egregiously low. I mean, the guy is one of the best birdie makers on the PGA Tour, routinely ranks in the top 25 in that category for an entire season, and today was great with the ball striking. He was splitting tons of fairways. The greens of regulation were there. They were also there in round 1. The unfortunate part is the putter that's typically a huge bright spot for Spieth. I mean, the guy's known for making these 20, 30-foot bombs. Hasn't been there. He's been atrocious with making the putts, hasn't been able to cash in. And if you can turn that around to something that we usually see from Jordan Spieth, again, usually one of the best putters in the world, he could put up a massive round. So I like him across a lot of the industry, not just on Prize Picks. If you guys are playing Showdown Golf tomorrow, also somebody to take a look at. But that 4 birdies or better number, I mean, he's tied with everyone at the bottom end of the board. You know, guys like Keegan Bradley, Brian Harmon, Taylor Gooch, all of these guys that are clearly not as good of a player as Jordan Spieth. They have guys priced above him. They're not good players either, right? I mean, Matthew Fitzpatrick, all of the respect to him in the world, right? He's a top 25 player in the world. Jordan Spieth is head and shoulders better than Matthew Fitzpatrick. Even going up a little bit further, some of these guys at 5, to say that they're a whole birdie better, especially for somebody like, well, Scottie Scheffler's only half a birdie now. He was at 5 birdies before. Just isn't right. So there's a clear level of value here with the Jordan Spieth line. It is going to be one of my core picks for tomorrow. Next up, another birdie or better number I want to touch on is Taylor Gooch. So even though he isn't the same player as Jordan Spieth, he has a very similar player profile. He's very good with the irons. We've seen that through the first 2 rounds. We had the guy shot 8 under today. He's also somebody who's a high birdie or better percentage player. Extremely aggressive, not afraid to go out there and put up a low score. And even though he did have that really solid round today, I usually have a lot of trouble with people backing that up round after round, particularly if it's been 2 really good rounds in a row. But in round 1, he was shaky, right? Just 1 under par. So it's only been one of those rounds in a row. I'm a little bit less likely to fade somebody in that circumstance, especially when they're so good off the tee. He's extremely accurate, and with these firm fairways, where if you're even just a little bit off, you're going to be missing them, I want guys that are accurate off the tee. People that are also going to keep themselves out of a lot of the trouble. There's also quite a bit of water at this golf course. So he fits a lot of the mold that I'm looking for. Aggressive player, also relatively accurate off of the tee, and would even consider taking it at 4.5 birdies. So it's great to see that it's only down there at 4. Now moving on to the next market I want to take a look at is going to be the greens in regulation market, which a lot of these numbers are extremely high. I mean, even John Rahm here at 14.5 greens in regulation, I was talking to a couple people in the Discord about it. That's an egregiously high line. If he misses 3 fairways, guys, he hits the over, right? But if he misses just 4 greens of the entire day, right? Out of 18 greens in regulation, he ends up hitting the under. And that is more than possible, especially with these trampolines that we have for greens this week. I don't have the stones to go and fade a John Rahm, obviously the world's best player. I think it makes more sense to go to somebody like a Brooks, right, who's had 2 ceiling rounds in a row, and he burned us today, right? He's somebody who went out there, also had a really solid round. But if you take a look at the recent form, he hasn't been that type of player. He's been atrocious over the last 3 to 4 months. In fact, hasn't really posted anything better than a top 30 finish since the middle to late part of the fall. I mean, just not really what we're looking for, especially from some of these top end options. And historically, well, I don't want to say historically, it's more recent form, but over the last few months, what has really held him back is that iron play. So even though he hit 17 of 18 greens today, again, that's why the number's up here at 14. I don't see him going out and doing that again. It's extremely hard to repeat that type of performance. And Jordan Spieth, somebody who, again, we could consider taking the under on. I like the fact that he's aggressive, but 14 greens in regulation is a lot for anybody, even for Xander Schauffele. And Xander Schauffele's hitting the absolute crap out of the ball. So much like John Rahm, I don't necessarily have the stones to go and fade them, but I would not be against either of those 2 options. Going a little bit further down the board, you can see that we have Kevin Kisner as another pick in this greens of regulation board that also makes our core picks. He just historically isn't the best player at this golf tournament. He's a shorter hitter. In terms of a course fit, far from ideal. And in terms of his iron play, over the last 6 months, he's a loser to the field. And that's for the average tour player, not for some of these elite guys on the board. Kevin Kisner is a below average iron player. And while he will spike from time to time, he'll have golf tournaments where he gains 6 to 7 strokes on approach. every tour player has that. Every tour player is able to hit the ball every once in a while. And even though he did look good on the first 2 days, it wasn't anything outstanding. 13.5 is too much for pretty much anyone in this field, particularly when he's tied with people like a Justin Thomas, Cantlay, Louis Oosthuizen, or even a Billy Horschel, who's one of the better iron players on tour. He's just completely outclassed. So somebody I'll be taking the under on. If you go a little bit further down the board, you could convince me to take the under in Adam Hadwin. He's a little bit higher priced than he should be. Same thing with Matthew Fitzpatrick. And even down here at 13, Ryan Harmon. Just guys that are overpriced. I think pretty much everybody on this board is overpriced for what we expect for the conditions on Saturday and Sunday. But my personal favorites, of course, would be Koepka and Kisner. And now, lastly, the last pick on the board will be on the Fairways market. And it's going to be Bubba Watson under 8 fairways. So it's not even one of the higher picks on the board. Of course, we have guys projected for 9, even 9.5, 10 fairways for some of the guys at the top. But the thing that really separates the Bubba Watson pick is that he's historically one of the more inaccurate drivers. Like I said before, the guys that are still accurate off the tee are going to hit their fairways because that extra distance that they're getting is just going to be beneficial to them. They're going to be scooting it a little bit further down the fairway. Whereas guys like a Bubba Watson that have a ton of curve to their drives, and this is a huge factor with Bubba Watson, is he never hits a straight ball. So for him to have any chance at hitting these fairways, he has to hit the perfect drive. That's why he's had such trouble hitting the fairways this week. And anytime he's hitting the fairway, it's again because he's hit it perfectly with a ton of curve and lands it on the right side of the fairway. So if he's hitting it with left to right curve, he has to land it on the far left of the fairway. Or of course, the curve is going to bounce it across the firm surface into the other side of the rough. And of course, if he's hitting a fade, for a lefty, of course, he's a lefty, so it's a little bit different for some of you golf guys out there, where he's hitting it from right to left. He has to hit it on the far right edge of the fairway, or it's going to bounce the entire way across into the rough. That's how much curvature he puts on every single off the tee shot that he has, which is what makes this an exceptional pick. I mean, I consider taking Scotty Scheffler. He's also somebody who's more of a bomb and gouge type player. Really goes out there off the tee, swings with reckless abandonment. Matthew Fitzpatrick, he seems a little high there at 8.5. Hadwin there at 9 also seems a little bit inflated. If we go up a little bit further on the board, 10 for any player in this field's a lot. But I'm not willing to fade Abraham Ancer. You know, much like a John Rahm, when you have somebody that's the best in the world at a category, like Abraham Ancer is with his driving accuracy, it's hard to fade it, right? Even if the number's too high, sometimes it's hard to make that decision, right? So I'd much rather go down here to a Bubba Watson. But if you wanted to mix in a few guys like Kevin Kisner, Patrick Cantlay, even Xander Schauffele, who has been hitting a ton of fairways to this point, I'd be willing to do so just because the field average as of right now is hitting 7.85 fairways per round. And that is well below all these numbers, right? Some of them, it's beyond 2 under where they're playing. So I like a lot of the unders. They're not sexy picks. Again, anytime you're going prop hunting, the unders aren't going to be something that are really standing out to you. Again, it's not something that's exciting to root for, but sometimes they're the highest expected value picks. In terms of making our cards for tomorrow, it's going to be all flex plays. That's going to be the regular here in the channel for golf. Anytime you're dealing with a sport with this much volatility, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself as many bullets as possible. So I'm going to be entering this main card as always, but I'm also going to be going to a fairways card as we did for today, the one that ended up saving our bankroll. Going to a lot of the guys that we mentioned. I'll also be mixing in a greens and regulation card and just a birdies or better card. Like I said, pretty much all the guys in birdies or better seem a little bit overpriced. So in total, I'm going to have 4 cards for the day, 1 mixed card, and of course, 1 card for those major 3 categories. The only category I'm not going to be investing in is the strokes, and we already outlined the reason for that. It's just a little bit shaky. The numbers are all a little bit inflated. We should be taking a lot of the overs for this category, but it's hard to fade the best players in the world. And a lot of the guys that they have on here for strokes, outside of a Hadwin, Keegan, Horschel, Kisner, Harmon, are the best players in the world. So it's a tough task to do. That's all I've got for the prize picks preview. Before you go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what your favorite prop on the board is. It doesn't have to be something that you agree with on the board for me. It could be something that I wasn't even considering or the opposite of one of my picks. If that's the case, go ahead and let me know down in the comments. Of course, also why you're taking that pick. Love to get the debate going down there. Love to hear what you guys are doing for your picks. And of course, there's a ton of bright minds out there, so I'd love to hear from you guys. Make sure you go ahead and do that. We're going to have even more Prize Picks content coming throughout the future, so make sure to go ahead and look out for the video for round 4. That'll be coming out sometime tomorrow night. And of course, all of the regular golf content here on the channel, whether it's our course breakdowns, our DFS content for DraftKings, we're going to have you guys completely covered. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so you don't miss any of that content to come. I appreciate all of you guys, appreciate all of the support here on the channel. We're going to be over 700 subscribers sometime tonight, which is pretty bonkers for me. We were celebrating 500 subscribers less than 30 days ago. It's pretty crazy the type of growth that we've seen here of late. Really appreciate you guys out there. We're getting close to that 1,000 subscribers mark that I've been talking about for quite some time. So let's go ahead and have ourselves a round, and let's go ahead and make some cash for tonight.